I'm a screenwriter as well as a journalist with the local NBC station out here. So a little background on me. Basically, I've always had a passion for screenwriting since I was in high school, but I was kind of always told it wasn't like a viable career path. So I was kind of discouraged from doing that. So after college, I got a job with the local NBC 10, the local NBC station. Worked in journalism, did that for about 8 years, and then I turned 30 about 2 years ago, or a little like probably about 2.5 years ago. And I guess I had like a quarter life crisis, I guess, where I kind of felt like I wasn't really doing what I was really passionate about, and I always loved screenwriting, and everyone always discouraged me from doing it just because it's such a difficult industry to break into. But I was just like, you know what, let me just give this a shot. Let me just try it. I found a way to still balance my day job in journalism and still write on the side. So I ended up writing a couple feature scripts. The second script I did called Skin. It's basically like a black sci-fi feature, and it won a local Philadelphia competition, and it also placed in some bigger competitions as well. And basically, what happened was I joined a screenwriting group on Facebook. A screenwriter on there did a logline competition where he would pick his 6 favorite log lines and then read the scripts. The script for Skin, the logline for Skin was one of the ones that he picked. He ended up reading it. We did a Zoom call. He loved the script, and then he gave it a shout out in the group. Little did I know that a member of the group was also an assistant with Fourth Wall Management. That's a literary management company. And she contacted one of the employees, a manager by the name of Sydney Blanc. And then about 3 months later, I almost forgot that I had done the whole competition. Sydney reached out to me, said that she loved the script, and we talked. And then right there, we made an agreement, and I ended up getting repped by her. And this was in June, last June. So since then, it's been like a bunch of just kind of like general meetings that she's put me on with different executives. Nothing yet as far as any interest in actually buying the script, but it's more so about just networking and kind of introducing myself, getting my name out there. And yeah, now I'm just working on other projects. I got three scripts I'm working on. One is a TV pilot about John Africa and the Philadelphia group Move. I don't know if you've ever heard the 1985 Move bombing, but there's recently an excellent documentary on HBO called 40 Years a Prisoner about the son of one of the original members. You guys should all check that out. It was excellent. So I'm working on that. I'm also working on an action thriller feature and a horror feature as well. So those three are kind of like in the pipeline, and then continuing to try and push my sci-fi script Skin and just try and get it out there and just networking it, as much as possible. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think I've spent the last couple of years just kind of honing my skills as a screenwriter, but one thing I'm still very new at is kind of the business side of it. That's still what I'm trying to teach myself as far as how option deals work, how shopping agreements work, how to kind of create something that's marketable while still kind of holding true to my strengths and as a writer. And then obviously just trying to still improve as a writer. I still feel like there's a lot I can improve with my screenwriting. So getting as much feedback as possible, connecting with other writers, other filmmakers like yourself, and just kind of seeing other people's work, because I feel like giving feedback also kind of inspires me as well, and kind of helps teach me how to, improve myself. So that's really what I've been doing, just connecting. I joined the Black Screenwriters group on Facebook. I joined Clubhouse, which I kind of have some mixed feelings about, but I have had some cool people over there too. So yeah, and stuff like this is awesome, man. I'm glad that you're doing this. I'm just happy to be here and just connect with all you guys. So first of all, I'm not in New York or LA, right? So what I was told by everyone is that you got to move. Like Philly is not a place you want to be if you want to break into the film industry. But then the pandemic happened, and then that kind of just changed how everyone communicated with each other. Where you didn't really have to be you literally could not be in an office to connect with someone else. But basically, I after I won this Philadelphia contest called Set in Philadelphia, a bunch of local screenwriters reached out to me. They just wanted to meet me and kind of hear my story and stuff. This one Philadelphia-based writer invited me to a Facebook group. It's just the screenwriting Facebook group, and like it was a lot of, a lot of kind of just people like me that were just kind of just learning about, kind of the craft of screenwriting. A couple established like WGA members and stuff, but you kind of had to like sprinkle, like kind of go through like a bunch of different posts to find that. So this one writer by the name of Bob Sands, he's a published, he used to be an actor. Now he's a screenwriter. He's done like a lot of like Hallmark films. He also did a film called Extracurricular Activities. It was like a dark comedy that came out on Amazon probably about like 2 years ago. So he did this competition where he was just like, all right, send me your log line. I'll pick my 6 favorite ones and then I'll read your script. So I'm like, all right, like, let me just try it. Like a whole bunch of people wrote stuff in the comments. I put in my log line and he ended up choosing it. So we did a Zoom call. I was kind of nervous. I didn't really know what to expect because at that point, the script had kind of gotten mixed reactions from different people. And he really, really loved the script, and I think what it kind of taught me was that, like, a lot of people think that they need this script that like everyone is in love with to kind of break in. All you really need is like one person of influence who just knows people or who has some kind of influence to really champion your work. And sometimes that can be enough. I think about like the scripts on the blacklist that come out every year. A lot of these scripts, when screenwriters read it, they're like, oh, like that was the script they chose. Like, oh, I didn't think it was that great. But then you see the story behind it. You see it was just one agent or one executive or one writer who just really connected with the work and really pushed for it, and sometimes that's all it really takes. And in the case of my script, I think that was a big part, and then, like I said, a member of that group happened to be with Fourth Wall Management. She reached out to me. She wanted to see the script. At that point, I'm like, okay, is this like a scammer? Like, who is this person? So I kind of like, I looked her up. I was like, all right, she's like legitimately with this company. It's a legit company. I kind of asked around to other writers that I knew to kind of do some homework for me and see like how legit this place was. And it's very legit. So that's another thing. You kind of have to like vet, because you have a lot of people that kind of come in wanting to take advantage of writers, whether it be people that are like, oh, send me some money and I'll push your script. Like, never give someone money to like just, to push your script, because it's almost always like a scam. So I sent her the script, and again, I didn't think about it at all. And this was in April. In June, finally, Sydney Blanc with Fourth Wall reached out to me, and she was like, hey, like, I really enjoyed your script. I really connected with it. I would love to just talk to you, like introduce myself. And I'm thinking, okay, it's like this Hollywood person. I'm coming from Philly. Like I don't know what to expect. Should I be in a suit when I talk to this person? But it was like she was so down to earth. It was so low key. It was like just a normal. It's like this, just like a normal conversation. And really, she just asked me like what my story was, what my thought process was behind the script. She explained what she liked about the script. That's another thing too. Like, if someone is just like, oh, I love your work, you should ask them why, because like they may have taken something from it that you didn't even intend to do it, or they could just be bullshitting you too. Like you never know. But just her explanation, I'm like, yeah, like she really got what I was going for when I wrote this. And basically what we agreed to, the deal was I didn't pay her anything, but the agreement was basically that if she would shop the script around, if she ever sold it, she would get 10% of the fee that I would get for the script. So that's the agreement. So, obviously before I agreed to it, I asked some other writers that I knew, some experienced writers. I asked an entertainment lawyer that I knew, like always just trying to get as much feedback from experienced people as possible, and yeah, after enough people kind of looked and kind of checked her, her background and all that, they're like, yeah, she's legit. She has some legit clients. And yeah, we just made an agreement. And since then, it's been just, like I said, like a lot of general calls. I think a big thing is like, it's sci-fi. So that's kind of a hard sell. And I feel like at least from my experience, a lot of producers now are looking for more low budget, more like self-contained kind of thrillers, especially with the pandemic too. Like it's hard to do anything that's like too high budget, So that's kind of why it's stalled a bit. I mean, if anything, at this point, it's like a good writing sample, just kind of show people like what I can do as a writer, and then hopefully, I think our next goal really, from what she's told me, is to try and get me into a writer's room somewhere. And my problem is I'm not a TV person at all. I've always been more in, like, with features. I'm not TV at all. But she was like, yeah, you need to write a pilot, because that's kind of an easier way to break in than to just shop around a feature. So that's kind of why, I've been working on this pilot. And it's different, because, like, I'm used to just, okay, 2 hours, you have a complete arc, you do what you need to do with your characters. I'm not used to this, like, okay, slow build, you kind of introduce. And then a big challenge for me too, because again, I'm not a TV person. I'm like, okay, how much should I put in this pilot, and then how much should I just, like, tease ahead, because, like, the first draft for the pilot that I did, it's kind of like a self-contained story. And I got feedback, and they're like, okay, this is good, but, like, where are you going to go with this? You kind of just close everything off. Like, you need to tease towards something. So that's kind of what I had to learn too, to kind of balance teasing towards something and also doing enough where you kind of, like, put in your best elements in the pilot, because you're also showcasing the potential for the show. So that's like that. I felt like I kind of had to relearn how to write, because I was so used to doing features, and pilots are just completely different. It's 5 acts instead of 3 acts. And then what you're doing is it's just different. Like, there's a lot more flashbacks you can use, and kind of the rules that I was taught writing features were different for pilots. So that's kind of the challenge I'm on now, just trying to learn more, trying to read more pilot scripts, trying to watch more like TV shows, because, like I said, I'm not a TV person at all. So that's like a different skill set, and kind of a different frame of mind that I kind of have to be in. So yeah, man, it's a constant just learning curve. Like, there's just still stuff I'm still learning about my own writing, and just how to do this, how to navigate with it. So yeah. A big thing for me, and again, everyone's process is different, but my process, I start with the idea. I try to start with a log line. I feel like if I can get the log line right, if there's some structure there, then that's like a good sign that, like, there's a story, like, because sometimes a log line can just, you don't really have any stakes or goals or urgency. And you're just like, all right, there's really nothing to build on. So I'll start with a log line, start with a very brief summary, and then I'll build out the treatment. And then eventually I try to get the treatment so detailed where every single paragraph will represent a scene in the script. I always find that, like, the more detailed the treatment, the easier it is to write the script. So write the treatment, get it detailed, get your characters down, write the script from there. A big lesson that I learned is that when you finish your first draft, I call it like the first draft high. You're so amped up, like, because you finish the script and you think, oh, this is the best thing in the world. This is going to win all the Oscars and everything. And it sucks. Your first draft will suck, and you need to, like, take at least a week away from it and then give it some fresh eyes. I made the mistake of, I literally finished the first draft, and like 2 or 3 days later, I submitted it to get some just to get some feedback. And they're just like, yeah, this is a good idea, but it sucks. Like there's just a lot you need to change. And so that's the big thing. Your first draft is going to be terrible. And you need to kind of just step away from it for a couple days, give it a week maybe, and then go back to it with fresh eyes and just think, okay, all this makes sense in your head, but is that coming off on the page? Is there clarity there? And the next thing I'd say after you do your second draft that's when I normally try to send it out for feedback. Basically, I have, like, through the Facebook screenwriting group, I joined, I was on Reddit screenwriting. What I ended up doing was just a lot of different script swaps with other writers. I would read their stuff, they would read mine, just kind of like a free way to get feedback. And then I would use coverage services. The Blacklist was one, and then We Screenplay was another. We Screenplay, they're one of the cheaper coverage services. They tend to be way more, like, a little more nice, because they have a business to run. I mean, to give you some perspective, my latest script that I'm working on now, they gave my second draft of that script a recommend, and that same draft got a 6 out of 10 on the Blacklist. So just to give you a sense of, like, what their scale is, like, sometimes they're a little bit too nice. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. But what I try to do after I get as much varied feedback as possible, I don't just change stuff based on what one person said. I look at common critiques, right? So like if only one person is like, yeah, your dialogue sucks, and 9 other people are like, oh, your dialogue is great, I'm not going to listen to that one person. Now, if 8 out of 10 people say this plot makes no sense or this character is underdeveloped or something else, then I'll be like, okay, enough people have said this where I know there's a problem here and I need to address that in the next draft. So I kind of just go by consensus. I made the mistake of changing stuff based on one reader's opinion and then submitting it again to the same coverage company for coverage, getting a completely different reader who hated whatever changes I made based on what the other reader said. And so it just shows you how when you get to a certain level, like, and you're just like a competent writer, stuff just becomes very, very subjective. But at the same time, you kind of, the value in feedback is getting enough varied opinions and looking at kind of like the common critiques. So if you have a whole bunch of people saying one thing, then there's an issue that needs to be addressed. So that's kind of how I learned to take feedback. A big thing too, the great thing about script swaps as well is that you can see how good of a writer the person who's critiquing you actually is, right? So like, I've read scripts that are terrible, so I kind of take their feedback with a grain of salt. And then I've read scripts, I'm like, man, this writer's on another level. This is a better writer than me. I need to listen to what this person is saying, So that kind of also helps as far as knowing like what notes to implement, what not to. So that's been my process. Skin, it's gone through about 7 drafts. It took probably about like a year and a half of development before it was like at a place where I can really start sending it out. I think what I'm trying to improve now is writing faster because when you get to if you're on assignment for a script, you're not going to have a year and a half to do it. You may have like a couple weeks, couple months, So it's kind of learn the lessons that I learned before and doing more with the pre-development of the script too, to really make sure the structure is good. I think is huge because it just makes the actual writing of the script that much easier if you have a sound structure and just a very detailed treatment. So that's pretty much my process right now. And I've kind of networked with enough writers where I'm comfortable just sending them my work and I value their feedback and their opinion. And just the same thing. If it's common critiques that they're seeing, I know there's a problem. I know that's something that I need to address in the next draft. So yeah, that's kind of what my process has been. I find that I think initially I was intimidated, but I find that even if you're like the most successful established screenwriter, like you're still in a way in the Hollywood system, you're still kind of not valued quite as much. So because of that, I find a lot of screenwriters just very approachable. Like they're not on this high horse. They love to mentor, they love to connect. So it's been pretty easy to network. I mean, I've done it through that Facebook screenwriting group that I'm on that I mentioned. I've done it through the Reddit screenwriting group. Even I've done it through the forum that we're on through the college. Like I've met 2 other writers there, met you as well.
Right.
So it's pretty easy. I mean, it was definitely. I'll say this: when I won that local competition, like it's not a huge competition, but at least in Philly, it's the biggest screenwriting competition. So that kind of helped, kind of where certain local writers came to me, which was good. Prior to that, though, I would just use like the Reddit screenwriting group and just connect with other like amateur writers there. As far as being a Black screenwriter, I mean, it's funny, a big challenge. First of all, is my last name. I have an Asian last name. So I remember when I got coverage for Skin initially for the first draft, they just see your name. They don't know who you are. They don't see your picture. So, the first draft, like I said, it wasn't good. So, the feedback wasn't great. But I noticed they were really harping on like how the Black characters talked and the racial themes. And they were really kind of lecturing me about certain things. And then it kind of, okay, yeah, they probably think, oh, this is like some woke Chinese kid that thinks he knows like Black culture and so just like what so I got advice from someone that was like, all right, make sure like send in your LinkedIn picture or something, like make sure they know you're Black at least, but which is hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I think joining like the Black screenwriters group, everyone in there is like super like supportive of each other, even like the established people. And so I've connected with some people there. I know the screenwriter that kind of like put me on in the main group. He's Cuban American, although he looks white. But he's still really connected with what I was trying to do. And then my manager is white. Um, the entertainment lawyer who's helped me out a lot. He's Philly based. He's Black. So I think it just depends really on like the theme and what you're going for. I mean, Skin happens to be a script that deals with race heavily, so I think it's important. It was important for me to have Black writers look at it, but it was also important for me to have like non-Black writers, just to see if it could resonate with them, if they could pick up on what I was trying to do. So that was a big thing. I find though with Black writers, it's easier to kind of touch on certain issues, like the writer I mentioned that's on the collie. He's been having issues where he did a script. He's Black and he wrote a script that's very, very critical of white liberals, and which is like that's pretty much all Hollywood.
Right.
And he pitched it, and he's been getting like just a lot of pushback, and like he's kind of just frustrated with like how to navigate. And I go back and forth between telling him like, yo, don't compromise your voice and what you're trying to say, because what you're trying to say is very unique, versus like you got to play the game a little bit too. So that's a tough thing. I find too, and I'm sure a lot of people here kind of experience it too. It's kind of like that burden of representation where you feel like as a Black artist, you have to like, put on for the entire culture, even when you don't, that's not really your intent. An example of that is the horror feature I'm working on. It really has nothing to do with race, but I just wanted to make the leads Black, and it deals with themes of sex and violence. And I got feedback from it from the script coverage company. And again, I think they probably didn't know I was Black, but they were talking about how I had to be very careful with certain stereotypes as far as like Black sexuality and violence and Black violence. And like, I knew that they would not be saying this if the leads were white. It was just literally because they're Black leads. So it made me think, okay, like I want to be, I don't want to just have to think about these things, but you kind of do, like when you're creating Black characters, and you have to be mindful of it, whether it's fair or not, And I had that conversation with other Black writers, both in the screenwriting group as well as on Clubhouse. I brought it up. And yeah, they were kind of all, I got this insight from them as far as how to navigate. And I know I could never have this conversation with white writers. They just wouldn't really understand the pressure or just kind of that burden of representation, as I mentioned. So I think it's important to have both. It's important to have writers that are of different backgrounds from yourself. But it's also important to kind of have like that support base, like from other Black writers that are going through similar struggles that you are as well, that will really understand and may have a little bit more experience there too, that can kind of really teach you how to navigate, in a way that a non-Black writer or director just would not even understand or just be, or be aware of, So it's a balance. Just kind of having as diverse of a group around you as possible, I think, is the key. So yeah, that's a big thing, definitely. No, I definitely feel like writing female characters, writing characters of a different race, is important to get that feedback. I know my wife is the first person who reads my script, right? So I wrote like I said, the horror feature that I wrote. I initially wrote one of the lead characters as a white woman, but she visits like this hair salon. And when my wife was reading, she's like, okay, first of all, this woman she's not white. She's Black. Just how you wrote her, she's a Black character. This is the Black female character. You need to change her race right there. And like, that's the kind of insight that is important, I remember like my first script, the lead is a teenage girl. And when I described her as beautiful. And I got feedback from a female writer, and she was just like, yeah, like, don't just describe female writers as beautiful. Like it's not like a good look, because you wouldn't describe a male, character as handsome and stuff.
Right.
And that's the kind of note that, as a young writer that was just trying to, just get into it, like I really appreciated that perspective, and knowing that, okay, that's a thing, that's a huge thing. So yeah, I'm never arrogant enough to think that I would understand, I would have complete understanding of another group, like, that I don't belong to. So I always try to get that perspective, and that always kind of plays a role. And, for me, like the action script I'm working on, I originally wrote it as the lead as a black male. And I was writing, I was just like, why not just make her a black woman? It's an action movie. You don't see a lot of action films with black female leads. So I was like, let me just change the lead character to a black woman. At the same time, I didn't harp on her gender. Like I kind of just like there's a story of, like, if you read the original script for Alien, the character of Ripley isn't really described as like or I think the character Ripley was originally a male character. They just changed the character to a woman, but they didn't change anything else as far as what they did. She just happened to be a woman, and Ripley just happens to be one of the greatest, not only greatest female characters, but just greatest characters in general.
Right.
So that's kind of how I wrote it, where, like, because the script doesn't deal with issues of gender really, I just wrote her as a female character, and that was it. Like that's really the only thing I changed. Now, if it was dealing with that topic specifically, then I would want to get more insight from other women, especially just writers who are more experienced. I have one writer who I go to. She's a little bit older. She's won a couple, or she's placed well in a couple of competitions. One of the best writers that I know, and she always gives good insight as far as writing very multidimensional, very kind of multifaceted female characters. Like, so she's someone I go to for that, for advice on that. And it's a give and take thing. She's a white woman, so she's gone to me asking, like, hey, she wrote a script that had a black male lead. So of course she was valuing, like, my insight as far as how she was writing him and stuff like that. So that's kind of what you find in those kinds of relationships, where it's like a give and take thing. You kind of take different perspectives. The main goal really should just be to, like, no matter what you're writing, it should feel like a real character. It should feel like a multi-dimensional character. It should feel like the quality should be on the same level of all your other characters. One of my favorite, I'm right now I'm watching, I'm binge watching the Sopranos. I love the Sopranos, but I noticed, especially the first season, they're not that great at writing black characters. And this is, arguably the greatest show of all time. And they have struggled, like, so I'm just like, man, I wish there was like a black writer in the room, or just someone that could, can kind of tell them,
right.
What's going on. Like, even other shows, like my wife loves Sex and the City. And I was watching an episode with them where one of the characters is dating a black guy. And, I think the writing is great on that show, but I'm like, man, like, I could tell they have no black writers in the room. This is just terribly written. This is just like, like they needed some, some writer of color to just kind of like guide them on this, because, like, the quality of the writing just dropped completely when they were writing about someone that or writing about a culture that they just weren't familiar with, So I never want that to happen with my own work, where I don't put in the work to kind of like really make that character, put that character on the same level as anyone else, So that's very important, just to kind of make them as multidimensional as possible, and so that people won't see that drop off just because it's kind of outside your comfort zone, So they're just putting in the work, So that's the biggest thing. Well, I think the biggest surprise in getting the manager, and I kind of touched on it before, I had always thought that you had to be literally in the room. You had to be an assistant on some TV show. You had to be in LA, in New York. I was fully prepared to be like, okay, I got to make a choice. Like, I need to leave Philly to get, even repped. But I think it just kind of like, I was surprised by just like the way that I did it. I would never think that it would take like just joining a Facebook group, and just doing some like impromptu logline competition would get me a manager. So it kind of just shows like you got to kind of think outside the box, like, yes, LA, New York, it's kind of critical to be there, and that makes it easier, but there are other ways, The big irony was, like, in that Facebook group, that same Facebook group, so many people there are constantly complaining about how hard it is to break in. And they're asking questions like, how do I break in? How do I break in? And I just want to tell them, like, you're in there right now. You are talking to established writers, like assistants with management companies, producers. connect with them there, you know? So that was kind of the surprising thing. Like, it's just a changing landscape as far as how you can connect and network. Like, you never know, like, you know, someone that you just chat with could have a connection, you know? So like there's a connection and everywhere. It's not just, you know, moving to LA, you're gonna have to think outside the box there. And then as far as like what's surprising me now, I think I always assumed that like to get in or to kind of like, you know, to get a script that really resonates with people, you have to have this completely original, groundbreaking concept. And you know, a funny story, like, so there's, like I said, I've done a lot of general meetings. One of the producers there, though, she, you know, obviously she passed on Skin, but she liked the writing a lot. And she told me about a project that her company was developing. It was basically kind of like an updated, like Fast and the Furious. It was about street racing that was going on in urban areas during the pandemic, and because the streets were empty at the time, you know, it kind of allowed for crazier races. It was like this whole Vice article. So she was like, "Yeah, I've been telling a couple of writers about this. Like, I would love if you can like kind of come up with like a concept here for me after reading the article." So I read it, and in my head, I'm just like, "Well, you know, this was already done before. Like, I already saw this with Fast and Furious." So I came up with like this wild, like sci-fi, post-apocalyptic plot of like this like death race and stuff like that. So I pitched it to her, and she's like, "Yeah, that's nice, but like we're like you know, like I had to be way more simplistic, you know." So sometimes it's really like you can have a simple concept. It's just it's more about your style and how you write it, you know. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get in the frame of mind now, where like I think I'm so used to like coming up with like these like completely original log lines and concepts, and that's nice. That'll always get you attention. But what'll get you even greater attention really is just being able to write. You know, again, going back to the Blacklist scripts, a lot of them are just like biopics, kind of basic, you know, very basic premises. But if you look at the writing, they're just so well crafted that your eyes kind of just move down the page, like there's got like a flow to it. And I'm just like, man, I need to get on this level to really you know, to really break in, you know. So I'd say it's more. I learned really the biggest thing is like it's more so about perfecting how you write rather than perfecting your concepts. You know, you can write about the most bland topic in the world, but if you know how to write, how you kind of move people's eyes down the page and get them to just read the next page, I think that's more important than, you know, coming up with like the greatest plot in the world. You know. I think it's a mixture of both. You can write what you know, but you can expand on it, right? So the script I did, so Skin, it's about a black android who tries to find a social identity, who tries to like to understand the meaning of his skin color, what it means to be black in America, right? So I know about being black in America. I know about kind of feeling like these issues of identity, trying to be who society defines you as. Like, that's what I know. What I don't know, I'm not a science guy. I don't know about AI or androids or, you know, or and stuff like that. That's what I had to research. That's what I didn't know, right? So I think you can write what you know, but also challenge yourself to take things that you don't know and incorporate it with what you do know. And I think that's how you can really come up with a cool story or concept. So like with Skin, the research was like, okay, how does AI work? Is there racial discrimination in AI? That's what I had to research. That's what I had to learn more about. But kind of the emotional truth of the script, that's what I already knew. So I would say, as far as what you should know the theme, like know the emotional truth, know like what you're really trying to say with your script, but also challenge yourself beyond that. And with the world building, the world that you create, that's where you can write what you don't know. That's where you can do more research and really try to learn more, you know? Because like if I had just done a script about a black kid just struggling with identity issues, it would have been cool, but I don't think it would have gotten as much attention. You know, like that film has been done before. You know, it's been done I couldn't write a better movie than Moonlight, So it's like, why try to write that movie, or like Boys in the Hood. I couldn't write, like I couldn't do that.
Right.
But what I haven't seen really is a science fiction film that deals with race in a way that's not allegorical, in a way that's like, it's like kind of in your face. So I was like, all right, let me take what I already know, just about Black identity, and again incorporate it in a world that I'm not necessarily familiar with, but do enough research where I can kind of just merge them both. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's a mixture of both. Like, write what you know, but also challenge yourself to incorporate things that you don't know into it to really elevate it. So yeah, yeah. So basically, what happened, before I met my manager, I used the website Coverfly to kind of submit my script to different contests, and they give your script a score if it places well. So at that point, it had placed well in a couple of contests. It just won the Philadelphia one. So after that, a producer on Coverfly reached out to me. Um, we hit it off. She loved the script, but she was kind of more of a junior producer, and she was working with another producer who I'm not going to name them just to
Right.
but basically what ended up happening is that producer read the script, wasn't didn't liked it, wasn't quite as enthusiastic about it as the junior producer. So he gave me some notes, like he's like, hey, like I think you should do this and do that, kind of changing the direction of the script. And then they basically wanted to develop it and shop it to different people. I looked him up. He was a legit producer. Because I wasn't repped, I wanted to kind of understand more about like what he was trying to do. The issue was he wasn't really presenting an option agreement. He wasn't paying me anything. It would have been like a free rewrite, which I'm okay with doing if there was like a contract involved.
Right.
There was no contract. It was kind of like a written. He sent me an email that was kind of vague language that I didn't quite understand. So I found an entertainment lawyer who looked at the email, and he was just like, "Yeah, he's being vague here. Ask more questions. Like, be more. Get him to be more specific." When I asked him more questions, I could tell he was kind of getting kind of frustrated, and just the vibe was kind of off. I went to that screenwriter who did the competition, who's basically like one of my mentors, and he's just like, yeah, a lot of producers will do this to new writers, where they're trying to like hook them in with promises of developing a script, and essentially you're just developing an idea for them, and because there's no agreement, they can just do whatever they want with it. So after getting like a bunch of different advice, I was just like, you know what? Yes, I would love to like kind of break in here, but this just doesn't feel right. I've gotten enough people that were just like, all right, this is a little shady. There's nothing really in writing here. So I turned it down. I was completely respectful. I wasn't, and then he told me that, so he knows a couple, he claimed to know like some producers and filmmakers. So he claimed that because he knows them and because I turned him down, that I am not allowed to ever shop my script to those people. But like it's like the most ridiculous, like passive aggressive email. And the moment he sent me that email, I'm like, okay, I made the right choice to not work with this guy, because it just didn't feel right. And clearly it was, it was shady. So the lesson I learned there is just like, he was a real producer. Like he's done some indie stuff, and but to not just take that and jump with it, to get, especially when there's nothing in writing involved, to not just jump into it, because you can really kind of screw yourself over, and just really be in a position where you're taking, you're being taken advantage of. So like, as exciting as it was to have some interest, you know, still don't just jump into a situation, because Hollywood, there's like just a lot of just sharks that are just looking to just take advantage of people like us, take advantage of new writers that are trying to break in, So just get as much, do as much, background checks as you can, and use kind of your resources to kind of get that done. So yeah, I mean, I think when I initially turned it down, I'm like, oh man, I just, that's my only shot. That's it. I just messed it up. And then I think when I saw that email, I'm like, all right, is this really the kind of guy I want to work with? And then a month later, I got my manager. So there's always gonna be other avenues, So you just kind of have to know your worth, and also just be very, very wary of people trying to take advantage of you. So that was kind of the big lesson I learned from that experience. So yeah, so basically it's basically you're introducing yourself, right? So what happened after I got my manager, she sent it out to different production companies. Uh, One of them was Issa Rae's company, different management groups, and basically it's normally an executive who's read your work. They ask you about your story. They tell you their story. They tell you the kind of projects that they're looking for. So it's very casual, and it's really just like a networking opportunity. A lesson that I learned, I my first general meeting, I didn't really know what a general meeting was. I thought it just meant that they were gonna buy the script. So I went into it like all like hyped up and stuff, and I quickly learned, they were just like, okay, we're gonna pass on it. We just want to know more about you, So that's basically what it is. Like you're just introducing yourself. It's very casual. Everything has been over Zoom just because of the pandemic. And you see kind of a list of the projects that they're developing. And really the goal of it is to make a good enough impression where they'll remember you. And if they have any assignments that they're putting out, they'll keep you in mind, you know, and to kind of just maintain these relationships. So basically like just don't be an asshole, like be nice, have a normal conversation with them, give them a sense of your journey of who you are as a writer. Ask them a lot of questions too. Like, don't just be one sided. Find out about them. Like, show interest as well. And yeah, it's like networking. It's like glorified networking basically. And you're just kind of introducing yourself to different production companies. So that's pretty much what it is. Like, it's literally just like a general meeting. That's a great question. And it's something I'm still kind of working on. I try to draw from life experience. For example, one script I've done, it's a pretty heavy element of it is a mother daughter relationship. So I try to like I have a younger sister, and she's very opinionated. My mother is very opinionated, so a lot of times they'll clash, they'll argue about different things. So I'll think back to like conversations that they've had. I'm just like, man, that could be like some real good dialogue. So I won't like take it word for word, but I'll kind of use that to kind of inform how I write, their characters, how I write their relationships. And then I try to think about a lot of stuff that's not shown on screen, right? So it's just like I'll create a backstory for them. I won't I won't like, spell it out in the script, but I'll be like, okay, because this person has this background, they'll say this or they'll act like this in that situation. So it's like a lot of prep work, a lot of stuff that you do that's not even in the script, but it just informs how they act, or the type, the kind of things that they say. So, I think it's a big thing to kind of like just look at examples in your own life. Reading a lot helps, watching different shows, seeing how characters are developed. And I think for me, the plot is only the first thing I have down. But after that, it's just like, okay, I have a character here. What can I do to make this character more interesting? Even if it's a minor character, like what can I do to make him more memorable? The action script I'm working on now, it involves this private military company, and they had kind of hire this enforcer. And when I first wrote it, it was like just kind of just generic assassin type. And then I was just like, all right, what if he just randomly really likes R&B music? And then I was like, well, R&B doesn't really make sense because like the script is heavy on religion. So what if he just randomly really likes like gospel music? And then it's like, okay, what if he's a Christian who's also this contract killer? And like, how does that work? How does he justify it? So it's just kind of like adding more and more layers and making it more interesting. So you can kind of like take like a standard tropey character and then just like, okay, how do I make this more memorable? How do I make this more interesting? How do I make them feel like more like a real person and not just like a stock character that you just kind of throw in there? So it's like that. You kind of you experiment a lot. You kind of see what works. The biggest challenge too is like you have to make sure it kind of fits the tone of your script. right? So like the action script again, it was kind of a pretty serious vibe. And I found with him randomly just liking R&B music, it was quirky, but it didn't really make that much sense. And it was kind of like a little too goofy to work with, like the tone I was going for. So I had to change that and be mindful of that as well. So it's kind of like this marriage between plot, tone, and you kind of have to like just add in, okay, knowing what you know about your character, how would they react to certain situations? So it's all of that really, and it's still something that I'm still working on. I still struggle with as a writer that I'm still trying to improve on. So yeah, I hope that kind of answered your question, but it's like it's a lot of different factors you kind of have to weigh in there.
Thank you. No,
No
it
problem.
really helped.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
So, I've been writing a short film, and the first time I pitched the script, I won a scholarship for about $1,000. But then something happened where I lost the scholarship, and then I pitched the script again, and I was in contact with the studio, and they're thinking that they could do it for like a budget of 20 or 30,000. But then, kind of listen to your story, like some of that shady tactics that they were using on you, they're kind of using on me, so it didn't really work out.
Okay.
But now I have a script that has a pretty decent track record, because clearly like money's being offered on it. So I'm wondering, what can I do to, like, how do I find more producers, or how do I work it some more?
Gotcha. Well, it's a couple things. Like do you have it copyrighted?
Yeah, I registered with the WGA, and
Okay, perfect.
the copyright process takes like 3 months, but it's on the way.
Right. So what I did before I had a manager, like I found an entertainment lawyer. He charged like, normally they'll charge a pretty small fee, but like if you have anything where they're presenting, first of all, if they're offering you anything, get something in writing that you can look at, that you can have a lawyer look at. That's the key. Like make sure there's something in writing before you say yes to anything. And yeah, I would just have like that's really not your job to go through contracts. That's what an entertainment lawyer does. So I would say like have them look at anything that's being offered to you. That's the big thing, because they'll kind of be able to figure out, okay, like is this legit, or are they kind of just trying to like pull a fast one on you or whatever. Contests are a little bit tricky. I mean, realistically, there's only really two contests that can realistically get you anywhere if you place, and that's Nickel and Austin. Page is a good one too, although it's I'm back and forth on whether it's kind of worth it. A lot of contests, it's kind of like it's a good way to kind of see where your writing is at. But as far as like getting any actual attention from producers, I'd say Nickel and Austin are probably the only two where if you place there, you might get some calls or some queries. And then speaking of queries, learn how to write a query letter. It's basically like your script's logline, who you are. You don't include the script. You kind of just say, hey, if you're interested, then let me know, and I will send you the full script. And there's ways to kind of write them, and that kind of involves looking at different companies, finding their contacts, and then just sending it out.
What letter? Can you repeat that?
A QUERY letter, query letter. So it's basically your script's log line, a brief introduction to who you are, and a brief synopsis. And when I say brief, like they get thousands of these, so just like kind of very quick and to the point. You don't include your script in it, and then if they're interested, they'll follow up and they'll ask you for your script. So that's a big one as well. So yeah, but networking is key. Like just try to connect with as many writers as you can. The link I posted to the Black Screenwriters group is good. I'll also post the general screenwriting group as well. And like I said, just offer to read other people's scripts and give them feedback too, because then they'll be way more willing to read your own work and kind of put you out there. I would recommend. Sorry, so did you say this script is a short as well, or it's also a feature?
It's a short film.
Short film, okay. There are different contests that you can enter in. I mean, normally I would like just check the history of the contest, like see other writers who have done it. Because what sometimes happens is with some of these contests, they'll not only give you money if you win, but they'll connect you to a manager, or they'll get you on some general meetings or general calls. So kind of do your research there. Like I said, from my experience, the two best ones to enter are Austin and Nickel. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Austin has a short film category. Nickel does not. Nickel only does features. But if you can see, if you can find, if there's a short film category in Austin, I would definitely enter your script into that competition because, like I said, even just like placing in the quarterfinals is enough to kind of get you some attention for your script there. Well, first of all, I try to like, you don't have to do this. I try to follow like a guideline of doing like 5 acts, and like knowing like when to like, act one, act two, act three, act four, act five, and like knowing when to take a break. But the biggest thing for me is like kind of like having a complete arc, but not really. like like with a feature, it's just like, okay, you have 2 hours, you have your structure, you have your character, something they go through, they changed, they've developed, and that's it. It's closed, it's contained. What I had to learn with writing a pilot is I had to kind of include a complete story while also teasing to something more, and that was a challenge for me. That was a huge challenge because I was just like, all right, how much do I put in here? If I don't put in enough, if I don't really show the full potential of this pilot or this concept, then it's kind of a waste of time. At the same time, I want to tease to something more, So kind of that tease element is what I had to learn. Like, okay, like I had to kind of like it's like this balance where you have to like make people satisfied and then also kind of like make them want more. One pilot I found that was very, very helpful for me, especially not being a TV guy, was the Breaking Bad pilot, which is probably that's probably the best pilot that I've seen so far as like a complete story, while also being like, man, I got to sit down and watch where this goes, but also completely like just introducing who this character is and giving like a satisfying story with the payoff and all that stuff. Like that pilot to me is a masterpiece as far as like something to study, and kind of doing what I just mentioned, like kind of find that balance. So but yeah, I think find that balance between like giving them enough where you have this complete arc while also wanting, kind of like leave them wanting more is kind of the biggest challenge and the biggest difference between TV and a feature. Whereas, with a feature, you kind of just put everything in there and it's done, it's complete, and that's it. So that to me is kind of the biggest difference.
I want to know, how do you think you'd navigate having to work on a number of projects while still having to step away from them just so that you can go back and rework and edit them, especially if they're like different stories? Because
Yeah.
I recall you saying that you're in this process of trying to do it faster because of the industry, because you won't have enough time. So my question is, how would you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, at some point, I'm not going to be able to do my day job and this at the same time. Like I've been able to navigate it so far, like, being more of an amateur writer. But like, if I really, really want to break in, like at some point I'll have to give up my job as a journalist. That day hasn't happened yet, but like it's going to come to a point where I'll need to make a choice. But as far as working on multiple projects, um, it's tricky. I think a big reason why Skin has had some success is because I took so much time to work on it. It was literally the only thing I was working on for about a year and a half. So I was able to develop it. Now I think juggling projects, it's kind of a matter of like, for me, the way my process is like, if I'm like in the right frame of mind, or if I'm super focused on one project, I'll just kind of go all in for like in spurts. So like I'll go all in for like a week or two on one project, leave it alone, go to another one and work on that. I think it's a part of it too is kind of discerning, okay, what has the most potential. From what I've seen, between the horror script and the action script I'm working on, the action script has gotten better feedback. It's gotten, more potential. So like for me at that point, I'm like, okay, let me put this horror script aside. It needs some work, but it's not really like striking iron right now. So like, let me put more of my attention and energy into this action script that I'm developing. So Yeah, I mean, in general, I wouldn't recommend doing multiple stuff at the same time because, it's kind of like this thing where it's like this quality versus quantity argument where it's like, if you split your energy into 3 or 4 different projects, you're not really putting in like the effort in one to really develop it and to really get to that place where it can be great, as opposed to just good. So I'd still recommend like kind of not following what I'm doing and kind of just like putting more of your energy into one really good project that has a lot of potential and really just taking the time and effort to kind of just build that up. So that's kind of my general advice. You know, um, and that's kind of what I'm doing now, where I'm kind of putting the other 2 projects aside and really putting more energy into this action thriller script that I've been developing. So yeah, that's kind of how I would navigate that. Well, I'm a firm believer of like what's meant to happen happens. So when I was applying for colleges, I applied to the dramatic writing school at NYU, the Tisch School. It required like a short script. I didn't get in, and I just think about like how my life would have been different if I had gotten into film school. So I didn't get in, and that was kind of one of the factors that kind of stopped me from really pursuing screenwriting for a long time. And then I took like one class while I was in college, but I was like a creative writing major in general. So kind of going through that experience, I'm just like, what, if I was meant to go to film school, I feel like I would have gotten in, I would have gone. Um, I think it would be different if I was a director as well. My talent has always been more writing. Not to say that film school isn't valuable for a screenwriter. It is. Like you can learn so much about just structure and plot and story and just the basics. I think for me, I've seen more success being self-taught, but the key thing is like when you say you're self-taught, to really be self-taught and to really read. Like I like reading the books, doing the master classes. Reading other scripts is huge. So if you don't go the film school route, still educate yourself, still find ways to educate yourself, and there's a lot of ways to do that as a writer. So that's kind of where I'm at, where I don't think I would ever go go back to school for screenwriting, but at the same time, because I'm not doing that, still being humble enough to know, like, hey, there's a lot that you can still learn about this, and it's still a craft, and you can still educate yourself using different resources. So that's kind of what where I'm at with that.
I have one question.
Sure.
How do you pick a strong log line? Like, how do you know your log line is working?
Yeah.
And how many rewrites do you go through to get a strong log line?
Yeah. So one thing I was taught, they call it GSU: goals, stakes, urgency, and getting that into one sentence that reads smoothly. So it's like, what are the goals of the script? Like, what are the goals of the character? What are the stakes? What can they lose? And what's the urgency? Is there like a time limit? Do they have like a day to do something? So if you can get all three of those into one sentence, I think that to me makes a good log line, that just reads well. And like I said, like the log line is normally the first thing I do because like to me, it gives me a good indication of like, okay, do I have a story here or no? So it's like if you have a log line that's kind of like incomplete or has no goal, no stakes, no urgency, then you kind of know, okay, like this story isn't really, there's no story here. Like it's not a good foundation.
Right.
So I think just thinking of like those 3 letters, GSU: goals, stakes, urgency, that'll really help as far as just knowing, how to structure it and just getting it kind of in one punchy sentence. It's kind of the best way to do it, I think.
How you doing, brother? My name is Roy. I'm a director / screenwriter. So my first question is, as a director and a person who writes, what I find interesting is how separated each department is. For instance, screenwriters only really deal with screenwriters, and directors only really deal with directors. How
Right.
often do you incorporate directors and cinematographers into your process? And then my second question is, how important do you feel screenwriting structure is, especially in a business where I find that a lot of times they focus on that more than they focus on the script?
Mhm. Yeah, I was just like talking about like writer directors, how it's a little bit different when it's their own vision, you know. But I think it's very important to establish that relationship, you know, because like there are a lot of cases of like a great script turning into a bad movie or vice versa, a bad script that's kind of elevated by a great director. Like I think of someone like Spielberg, who doesn't normally write his stuff, and he has a lot of scripts that are kind of just average scripts that he just elevates because he's like a genius director, you know. So like there's a trust issue there because like you're when you're a writer, you're essentially like you're kind of giving away your baby to you know, to someone else. So I think it's always important to like that at least be on the same page, like as far as what you're trying to do with the script, but then also as a writer, knowing that just the way the system works, like as soon as you hand it over, it's not yours anymore, you know? So it's like, it's like that trust, like, okay, this director's vision may be different from my own, but no matter what, I can at least trust that they'll, you know, be able to execute this in a way where like, I know like the final product is going to be, you know, incredible, you know? So I think it's important to just at least have that trust for them. But it really just depends on like where you are in your journey. Like I remember I was watching an interview with the writer of the first Men in Black movie. And I remember he was just like, oh, he was complaining about all the changes that were made. And like, even like Will Smith, like improvised certain lines. And then he watched like the final product and he's like, man, this is better than anything I could have come up with. This is like, and I'm just proud to have my name attached to this because it was just a great director who just happened to work with like very creative people that just elevated the material, you know? So it's a trust factor, but it's also an understanding with just the way it works. Like the director has more power once you give them your work, you know? But I do think there can be more to kind of like bridge that gap a little bit. So there's not so much of a disconnect. I mean, the very fact that I just told you, I just primarily work with other writers rather than other directors. That's a problem right there. I think there can be more to kind of bridge that gap a little bit, you know, and just kind of, you know, just kind of get an understanding of what the director is going for, you know? So, I hope that kind of answered your question, but you know, like I said, there's a key difference too between just writer directors and just directors, you know, especially with how they write their scripts. So.